Hello everybody, this is ManuS and welcome to my MTG Arena set review for M20. Has been a while since you heard from me in terms of Magic. I'm pretty busy with Eternal leading up to the World Championships, but I figured I'll get on to the set review rather later than not at all. So sorry for being a bit late. Was too caught up in Eternal to get started right once the spoiler was complete, but now we're gonna make up for lost time. I also decided to try and release one color per day, so I'll be doing like each color in like about 10 cards per part and like 4 parts per color all in one day, and today we're gonna do all the white cards. So before we get started, you know the drill. Hit the subscribe button down below, turn on the notification icon to not miss out on future content. And now on to the first part of the white cards. Alright, first we have Ajani, Strength of the Pride. New Planeswalker. We have a lot of Planeswalkers already, as you all know, so lots of competition there. Not sure how good this Planeswalker is going to be in the end. The +1, sure, you gain life for each creature and Planeswalker you control, but that's not that great for a Planeswalker usually, especially for a white Planeswalker that usually ends up in more proactive decks. The minus ability is kind of nice, basically gives you a 3 loyalty Planeswalker and a token version of Ajani's Pridemate, which then later can grow with the plus ability and stuff. And the 0 cost ultimate sort of is pretty strong here too. It exiles Ajani and each artifact and creature your opponent controls, but the problem is also in a world where there's a lot of Planeswalkers, yeah, that only does so much. In Limited this seems really powerful, but in Standard I am highly skeptical if and how playable this is going to be, honestly. Next we have Cavalier of Dawn. This is a cycle, 1 in each color. Yeah, this one seems pretty solid all in all. Basically you get to destroy a non-land permanent and the opponent gets a 3/3 token as a replacement. You also get a 4/6 vigilance for 5, which is pretty solid, and if Cavalier of Dawn dies you get to return an artifact or enchantment from your graveyard to your hand. Problem is a bit that there aren't a whole lot of artifacts and enchantments in Standard that you usually want to run, especially like in a white deck. The best one that comes to mind to pair this with is History of Benalia, but History of Benalia decks usually want to be kind of lower to the ground, so I'm not sure. Maybe there's some kind of mid-rangey deck that wants both, but yeah, not quite sure. Like all in all, the power level and utility is here, I would say, but it has some issues sort of just doing enough and fitting in nicely into decks, I would think. In Limited, however, this is a powerhouse, just like all of the Cavaliers, really. Next we have Bishop of Wings. This seems pretty fringe, but if there's some like angel tribal type stuff, this seems like a pretty good 2-drop for this type of deck. But yeah, this is probably not going to be like a truly competitive deck. But maybe there's like a decent brew that you can play on ladder with this and like the 3-drop Mythic Angel from M19, I forgot the name, and like Aurelia and Lyra and that sort of stuff, or just like Shalai. There's a couple of good constructed playable angels right now, so maybe you can sort of try and do that, but it doesn't seem that great. Like if your deck is defensive enough, 1/4 is a pretty nice blocker for 2, and then of course gaining life and gaining tokens is nice, but the more important part is the tokens, and the tokens only happen if your angels die, which is not a condition that you want to meet that often, so it's something that you're not going to get as much value out of, and so on. So yeah, not that impressive of a card, but not completely, sorry about that, not completely useless, I would say. In Limited, I mean, a 2-cost 1/4 alone already is fairly decent at times if your deck is more reactive, but it has to be white heavy enough to support a 2-cost double white 2-drop, so still pretty restrictive there. Also, it's a rare, so you're not gonna pick it very high, because there will be better commons and uncommons than a rare of this mediocre quality. Next we have Brought Back. This is kind of an interesting card. The main problem with the card is that the floor is really low, but the ceiling is really high. Like, for example, this is a pretty interesting mono white tool against, say, sweepers. Like, if you want to just play white weenie and don't splash a color, this seems like an interesting sideboard card. You can get back like your Benalish Marshal and your another like best unit, maybe a Loxodon. Or you can even on your turn just you lost your History of Benalia to its trigger, then attack. The opponent tries to block and trade as effectively as possible, and then you just brought back, get back the history, get back the best unit you lost, best creature you lost, which seems pretty strong. Like, this is definitely an interesting, at least sideboard card, I think, and can do some really powerful stuff. Next we have Hanged Executioner. We already have some kind of spirit support with the Phantasm in M19, which will only be around for so long, but while it is, it definitely seems like a nice curve to go like Phantasm into Executioner, if like spirits will be possibly a thing. I would kind of doubt it's not that likely, even though Strasky already is trying to make it a thing and hopes they are, but probably not. But yeah, this is basically kind of like a Moorland Haunting. You get 2 1/1 flyers for free, and unlike Moorland Haunting being an instant, this gives you the option to exile the actual Executioner to exile target creature, which is kind of a nice utility. Also, there's another card that we will be looking at in a moment that this happens to work with pretty nicely. So all in all, definitely seems like a pretty solid constructed card, and interesting at least. Problem, I guess, is that, say, White Weenie already has too many good 3-cost cards and doesn't really want this card. It's also not super powerful, it's just a solid card. In limited, however, this seems really great. Then we have good old Leyline of Sanctity. Nothing new here, nothing to see. Maybe a fringe sideboard card in Constructed, but officially now that it doesn't protect Planeswalkers anymore, since they got changed a while ago, the card seems pretty unexciting, all in all. I think this is mostly like a reprint to keep the price down in Modern, because the card has become pretty expensive in Modern. And they usually try to get like some Modern staples into newer sets, especially the ones that don't have much of an impact on Standard compared to Modern. Next we have Loxodon Life Chanter. Yeah, well, doesn't really look like a constructed card, but in Limited this can obviously be kind of a nice and strong card, although I don't see myself swapping my life total that often, because yeah, you need a really low life total and a fairly big board for this to do a whole lot. And then it's just like a 6-cost 4/6. Like, this is an okay limited card basically, and that's it. Then we get Planar Cleansing back. Nice to have, I guess, especially in a world of Planeswalkers, so this is kind of a nice tool for some more traditional hard control type stuff to keep up with all the Planeswalkers and stuff. So I guess in that regard it's kind of interesting, but it's also pretty expensive and hasn't been that great in the past. But it's a nice tool, like interesting card to be around, I think. Speaking of the card that Executioner is interesting with, Sephara Sky's Blade. First of all, we get a 7-cost 7/7 flying lifelink that gives all your other flying creatures indestructible. Not that great at face value, but she has a pretty cool alternate mode that makes her kind of an interesting build around. Instead of paying her mana cost, you can pay 1 white and tap 4 untapped creatures you control with flying to play Sephara. which is pretty powerful. The main question is, are there enough good flyers that you would want to put into a deck anyway to make this happen? Because once you are there, this seems like a pretty powerful addition potentially, but in the end it's probably going to be a bit too slow and situational, and every time you don't have 4 flyers, this is useless. Then if you have 4 or more flying units alive, you're kind of in a good spot already, so do you really need a card that is only good when you're doing well? So it comes with all these issues, but the effect is pretty cheap and powerful in a way, so it's kind of interesting to keep in the back of your head, but I don't have particularly high hopes. In Limited, it kind of depends on how slow the format is, if you can get to casting a 7-drop, but then I can see her taking over the game, especially if the opponent already had to use their removal beforehand. And last but not least, for the first part, we have Starfield Mystic. A 2-cost 2/2, and it makes all the enchantment spells cost 1 less. And whenever an enchantment you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you put a +1/+1 counter on Starfield Mystic. So yeah, this is kind of a weird card. I don't see this being particularly relevant. Making enchantments cheaper is usually not that great to begin with, then only being affected by like enchantments going to the graveyard, which is also not that common to happen, given that enchantments, well, are a permanent type that doesn't get killed that much, because not that many decks have cards that can kill them. So all in all, pretty underwhelming. I think not a very relevant card. Could lead to some nice built around decks in Limited maybe, but it's a rare, so it's not that easy. So yeah, that is the first part of the white cards. I'll just be back in a moment with the second set of 10 white cards, and yeah, see you in a moment. Stay tuned.